Hey logical listeners, in today's video we're going to talk about language.
Language.
That's right, Captain. Language.
People love you and you win. And when your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't. Because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
Steve doesn't like that kind of talk.
Well, Natalia, as surprising as it's going to be, Steve isn't alone in disliking that sort of language. Lots of people don't like it. It seems like the only thing that can bring our politicians together is condemning people for saying mean words. And that's really weird. In the midst of a government shutdown, politicians from across the aisle are coming together to deride and to scorn a freshman lawmaker. And I'm not saying this to make light of what Representative Talib said, because it's not a big deal. It just isn't. But it does suck that in the middle of a government shutdown, the one thing we can count on to unite our country's politicians is for them to band together to exclude and to deride someone who has less lawmaking experience than they do. That's really frustrating, and it also goes to show that the things that bring our politicians together are things that keep them really out of touch with the rest of the country. When the rest of the country is focused on ending the government shutdown, and when the rest of the country is focused on helping people, politicians band together just to isolate someone whose focus is doing real things. And impeaching the president is not an act of political theater. That's a serious political move that takes planning, that has a real and dramatic effect on the political landscape. That is not funding the government. That's not trying to fund a wall. And it's really weird that instead of working to end the government shutdown, all day, news cycles, news anchors, and politicians and political strategists have been going on air and have been making fun of this clip and have been deriding the person behind it. That shows just how out of touch these politicians really are, doesn't it? If you ask me, what politicians should be doing in this situation is not what they are doing right now. What politicians should be doing in this situation is they should be talking to Representative Talib, and they should be saying, hey, we love your energy, and while we know that there are people out there who are going to go and they're going to condemn you, don't worry about it. What we've learned from Representative Ocasio-Cortez is that the people who disagree with us will use anything and everything for ammunition. You can't listen to some of these people. Now, if you hear an individual complaint, you should probably listen to it, you should give it the respect that it deserves, and you should learn from it where possible. But the reality is, you didn't say anything that was a big deal. You didn't do anything that was particularly condemnable, and that's the truth. I understand that to a lot of people this is going to look bad and is going to give conservatives and the Republicans, and especially the far right, more ammunition, but the reality is those are individuals who manage to find ammunition out of everything. You just cannot take what they've got to say super seriously, at least not something like this. And it's important that young lawmakers be supported and that they be like, hey, if you make a mistake, own up to it, but not everything that everyone else says is a mistake is a mistake. And the reality is that this is how Representative Talib feels. And there is a wide room in the Democratic Party tent. And it's wide enough for people who think the president should be impeached, and for people who don't think the president should be impeached, as well as for people who are in the middle and who don't know if there's enough information or if there's any actual evidence that the president has done something impeachable. But what's happened here is that we've seen Democrats practice tone policing, and that's really frustrating.
New members, Rashida Talib, who is newly elected congresswoman from Michigan, used some colorful language to talk about what would happen to Donald Trump, to the president, saying, quote, we're going to go in and impeach the MFer. Your reaction to that comment?
I probably have a generational reaction to it. But in any event, I'm not in the censorship business. I don't think that, I mean, I don't like that language. I wouldn't use that language. I don't, again, establish any language standards for my colleagues. But I don't think it's anything worse than what the president has said.
Fair enough, but
Adler's talking point, you just had him on. He said, I don't like that language, and I don't think she's right that you can go after impeachment before the evidence is there. I think that's the right response to this. This is awful language, and I know everyone will say, but Trump. I agree, I'm with you. Trump has coarsened the language around politics to a really disturbing effect. The response should not be to match it. The response should be to rise above it and present clear policy arguments and even emotional arguments that don't have to go down to the basement of MFer. But
if you're curious about why I and other people care so much about this, we care about it because it's such a massive waste of time, and also because it's making a mountain out of a molehill. What's ultimately happening here is that real journalists are being asked to work on a story that is absolutely not at all important. And that's really frustrating because there's actual news that people could be covering right now. And also because the actual substance of what Representative Talib said is rarely addressed. Oftentimes, it's the style that's being attacked, which is fallacious. People don't like what Representative Talib said, often on the basis of it was mean, and especially that it included a mean word, or mean words, depending on how you spell motherfucker. And that's ridiculous. That is not at all a reason why people should be wasting time talking about this. It's one thing if you were going to focus exclusively on the idea of impeachment. And that's something that people can and should do. If people are just like, hey, this freshman lawmaker wants to talk about impeachments, let's do that. What would it take for impeachment to happen? And also, is impeachment realistic? That's a conversation worth having. What's not a conversation worth having is whether or not a freshman lawmaker should be punished or should be forced to make an apology, should be forced to censor herself just because she said something that offends some Republicans and some Democrats. That is not at all a conversation worth having, nor is it worth having if we're going to focus on the language in any particular way. We need to talk about people's ideas, not whether or not we agree with their language and whether they decided to include mean words in what they were saying or not. So this is where the end screen is going to go, probably in the next couple of seconds. I wanted to say this video is a definite departure, but I've been really enjoying hammering out videos every single day, and I've also been really living for the different types of editing that I've been doing. If you like the editing that I put in this video, please let me know. I like the inclusion of little comic clips. I think it makes things a little bit easier to watch, and I hope that you guys are having a great day. If you watch this on the day that it uploads, please go and check out the Cast, which is a podcast that Black Sofa Vlogs and I do every month, the first Friday of every month, where we talk about politics. And in this particular video's end screen, Black Sofa Vlogs, my guy, my dude, is going to be the person whose videos show up in the end card. So go check him out, go subscribe to him.